Have you ever had that moment where you stop mid-text, stare at the screen, and realize you don't even have the energy to explain yourself anymore? Not because you don't love them, not because the relationship never mattered, but because you are tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. You used to send the long message. You used to ask, "Are we okay?" You used to reach, and reach, and reach. And then one night, you don't. You sit there in the quiet, phone face down, chest heavy. And the thought hits you all at once. Why am I the only one fighting for this? Why do I always have to go first? What changed? Am I asking for too much? Or am I finally just done? And here's the truth that flips everything. The avoidant doesn't wake up when the empath gets louder. They wake up when the empath goes quiet. Because the relationship didn't start falling apart when you cared too much. It started revealing itself when you stopped carrying all the emotional weight alone. You're not failing at love. You're not weak for being exhausted. And this is not proof that you chose the wrong person. Sometimes the moment you stop chasing is the moment the entire dynamic finally becomes visible. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what changes inside an avoidant when the empath finally stops caring, why it often happens too late, and what this moment really means for the future of the relationship. Let's get into it. Most couples believe the problem is that one person cared more and the other cared less. But the real truth is deeper than that. What looks like the empath caring is often one partner over-functioning to keep connection alive. And what looks like the avoidant not caring is often a nervous system that has learned to protect itself by pulling away the moment intimacy starts to feel emotionally expensive. That's why this dynamic gets so confusing. Because beneath the surface, both people usually want connection, but they reach for it differently. One reaches by moving closer, the other reaches by creating space. One says, "Talk to me." The other says, "Give me a minute." And both are secretly saying the same thing: "Please make this feel safe again." Here's the part most people miss. When an empath is still chasing, explaining, checking in, initiating repair, and holding emotional presence for both people, the avoidant can stay asleep inside the pattern. Why? Because the system is still functioning. Barely, but functioning. Your partner's nervous system is reading you before their mind can catch up. So as long as you keep turning toward them, even while hurting, some part of them assumes the bond is still there. But when your energy changes, everything changes. When your warmth goes flat, when your questions stop, when your eyes stop searching, the avoidant doesn't just notice your silence. They feel the loss of the emotional bridge you had been building the whole time. And that is when the pattern breaks open. 1. They feel the silence more than they ever felt the words. Here's the part no one talks about. Most couples think repeated conversations are what make someone finally understand. But most people in relationships miss the fact that an avoidant often adapts to words they can predict and only truly notices the emotional shift they cannot control. That's why the empath's silence lands so hard. Not because silence is manipulation, not because pulling away is a strategy, but because when you stop reaching, the avoidant loses the thing they had quietly organized themselves around: your continued emotional availability. For a long time, they may have felt pressured by your needs, overwhelmed by your questions, defensive when conflict came up. But beneath the surface, their nervous system also got used to one powerful assumption: no matter how distant I get, they'll still be there. And when that assumption breaks, something in them jolts awake. The disconnecting version sounds like this: You say, "Can we please talk about what happened last night? I feel shut out again." They say, "I don't want to do this right now." But the connecting version begins to form the moment your energy changes. You say nothing. You just stop pushing. And suddenly their mind starts racing. Why is it so quiet? Why aren't they asking? Did I actually lose them? That's the moment the pattern becomes real to them. And when you do that, the walls between you start to come down without either of you having to say a word. 2. They don't panic first. They scan for control. And this is the one most couples never figure out. Most couples assume that once the empath pulls back, the avoidant instantly breaks down and runs toward connection. But most people in relationships don't realize that avoidance is a protection pattern, which means the first response is often not vulnerability, it's control. They may act normal, detached, even colder at first, not because they feel nothing, because they feel too much, too fast, and their nervous system scrambles to regain stability before they let themselves feel the loss. This is where it gets really interesting. What looks like indifference is often internal surveillance. They start watching your tone, your timing, your body language, your absence. Not to reconnect yet, to assess the threat. Are they really done? Are they pulling away to punish me? Do I still have access here? That internal monologue matters because it tells you the avoidant has noticed the shift, even if their behavior still looks withdrawn. The disconnecting version sounds like this. You stop initiating. They act like nothing's wrong and say, "You've been quiet." The connecting version would sound like this instead. They say, "I can tell something changed. I don't fully understand it yet, but I don't want to ignore it." Not more intensity, not a dramatic apology, not some grand romantic speech, but honest awareness, real presence, emotional contact. And that's the shift that turns a relationship that feels like a negotiation into one that feels like a refuge. 3. They start missing what they used to resist. But here's what nobody explains. Most couples think the avoidant misses the empath only when the attention disappears. But most people in relationships don't understand that what avoidants often resist in the moment is exactly what they ache for once it's gone. The check-ins they rolled their eyes at, the "what's wrong" they brushed off, the emotional labor they quietly relied on, the way you kept turning toward them, even after disappointment. When you stop, the emptiness becomes visible. And this is not because avoidants are heartless. It's because emotional safety often registers late for them. Their system feels closeness as pressure in the moment, then feels the absence of closeness as loss once the moment has passed. It's like scar tissue. It forms slowly. 100 small moments, 100 missed repairs. Then, one day, they touch the relationship and realize they can't feel what used to be there. The disconnecting version is this. When you used to say, "I just want to feel close to you," they answered, "Why does everything have to be so serious?" The connecting version comes later, often too late. Now they sit alone and think, "She wasn't trying to control me. She was trying to reach me." Or, "He wasn't being needy. He was asking me to meet him where it hurt." That realization can hit hard. And when it does, your partner stops feeling like a burden to themselves and starts feeling like someone they may have loved too passively to keep. 4. They reach out differently, but not always deeply. Here's the part that confuses almost everyone. Most couples assume that when the avoidant finally comes forward, it means they are now fully emotionally available. But most people in relationships don't realize that an avoidant's first move toward reconnection is often hesitant, indirect, and still wrapped in self-protection. They text something casual. They send a meme. They ask if you got home okay. They bring up some random detail from last week. Why? Because full vulnerability still feels dangerous. The nervous system wants closeness, but only in doses it believes it can survive. So yes, they may come back, but not always cleanly, not always clearly, not always with the words you were hoping to hear. And if you don't understand that, you can mistake crumbs for change. The disconnecting version sounds like this. They disappear emotionally for weeks, then pop up with, "Hey, been busy, you good?" The connecting version sounds like this instead. "I know I've been distant. I think I assumed you'd always be there, and I'm realizing how much that hurt you. I don't want to keep doing this the same way." That's different. That's not contact for relief. That's contact for repair. Something in him is saying, "Don't hide this time." Something in her is quietly registering, "He actually sees the damage now." And that's when your relationship stops revolving around old cycles and starts becoming something more real. 5. They feel rejection, even if you were just finally protecting yourself. This is where it gets really important. Most couples think the empath pulling back is just healthy detachment. But most people in relationships forget that, to an avoidant, someone else's distance can hit the exact same wound that caused their avoidance in the first place. That's the paradox. The person who struggles to stay connected can feel deeply destabilized when connection is no longer available on their terms. So when you finally stop caring out loud, they may not interpret it as wisdom. They may interpret it as rejection. Not because you did something wrong, not because your boundary was cruel, but because old attachment pain translates distance into danger almost instantly. Your nervous system in conflict is like a smoke detector. It cannot tell the difference between actual abandonment and emotional deactivation. It just sounds the alarm. The disconnecting version sounds like this. You say, "I'm done explaining how this affects me." They hear, "You don't matter anymore." The connecting version sounds like this instead. You say, "I care, but I can't keep carrying this alone. If we're going to do this, I need you here with me." That sentence matters, because it protects your self-respect without turning your pain into a weapon. This isn't a communication hack. This is just what two emotionally mature people naturally do when they stop abandoning themselves in order to keep the peace. And when you do that, you create the kind of safety where honesty can finally breathe. 6. Some avoidants come closer only when they feel you slipping away. And honestly, this part hurts. Most couples want to believe that when the avoidant shows up more after distance, it automatically means love got stronger. But most people in relationships have to face the truth that sometimes what activates closeness is not emotional growth. It's fear of loss. They become more affectionate, more attentive, more available, but only because the bond feels threatened. That can look like love. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's panic wearing the clothes of love. And you need to know the difference. Not more texting, not sudden compliments, not one emotionally intense night where they finally open up, but consistent presence when things are calm. That's what change looks like. Because secure love is not only visible in crisis, it's visible in steadiness. The disconnecting version sounds like this. The moment you detach, they say, "Wait, don't do this. I need you. I'll change." The connecting version sounds like this over time. "I know I usually wake up when I feel you leaving. I don't want to keep loving you only in emergencies. I want to learn how to stay present before we get there." That sentence is rare, but it's real when it comes. Her brain is quietly registering, maybe I'm not the only one holding this anymore. And that's the feeling that turns emotional survival into actual partnership. 7. When the empath stops caring, the real question finally appears. And here's what changes everything. Most couples think the big question is whether the avoidant will come back. But most people in relationships eventually learn that the deeper question is whether the relationship can become safe enough that you no longer have to disappear inside it just to keep it alive. That's the real crossroads. Because when an empath finally stops caring, it usually doesn't mean they became cold. It means they got tired of bleeding connection into a space that would not hold it. And if the avoidant responds, the response matters. Not performative remorse, not temporary intensity, not fear-based closeness, but emotional responsibility. Can they name the pattern? Can they stay present in discomfort? Can they repair without needing you to drag them there? Can they become emotionally available in a way that feels steady, not situational? That's the test. The disconnecting version sounds like this. They come back and say, "I miss you. Can't we just go back to how it was?" The connecting version sounds like this. They say, "I don't want the old version. The old version worked for me because you carried it. I want to build something where you don't have to." Bro, that's the line. That's the difference. That's when your partner stops feeling like a problem to manage and starts feeling like a person to come home to. So if you're in this moment right now, hear me clearly. This is not just about whether someone finally notices your absence. It's about whether you are finally noticing your own worth. This isn't a checklist. It's an invitation to show up differently. To stop confusing overgiving with love. To stop confusing distance with strength. To stop calling painful patterns just how we are. When you internalize this, you stop reacting and start responding. You stop begging for crumbs and start recognizing what real connection actually feels like in your body. And whether this relationship heals or ends, you walk away more emotionally honest, more grounded, and more capable of building something secure next time. These aren't just tips for a better relationship. They're the beginning of becoming the kind of partner you always wanted someone to be for you. Because the moment an empath stops carrying the whole relationship, the avoidant is finally forced to meet the truth of what was there all along. Love does not become real when someone chases you harder. It becomes real when both people are finally willing to stay. If this hits something real in you, drop "real" in the comments. And if you want more videos like this on attachment, connection, and the patterns beneath the surface that quietly shape your relationships, make sure you subscribe.